Well, welcome, Sea Life. Nothing? I don't get anything? No welcome? Man, we are glad that you're here today. As well, those of you joining us online, we're so honored to have you with us. In fact, can we just give it up for those joining us online? Can you celebrate those with us here this morning? Man, we're glad you're here. Let me ask you this question as we begin today. Has anybody else in the room ever felt like you were living below your potential? Like anybody else in here ever not reach your potential? I'm the only one in this whole place. Like nobody else at any point in your life, like maybe it's just a segment of your life that you thought, yeah, I was below my potential there. Like I know as a student, I was not a good student. It used to be like I would come home. In fact, my wife now will get onto me because my kids come in and it's clear that they're not applying themselves in school, and I will want to have a come to Jesus meeting about these. Some of these I can't even tell you what gets said in there because it's really not very pastorally. But and my wife will be sitting over in the corner and she's kind of giving me this look like, I know what your grades were, and hers were like near perfect. Like hers were like straight A's all the way across the board, and mine were not so much. And so, in fact, I would come home with like a C, and my dad would ask me this question. He'd be mad at me, and he would know that I could do better. And so he would ask this question. He would say, Paul, are you dumb or lazy? I'm like, I don't like those choices, because I knew the answer for him was not, the lazy answer was not going to go well. And I knew I wasn't dumb, so I would always want to turn it around. I would want to say something like, well, no, Dad, the better question is it genetics or environment, But I did not say that, those were not the days that you could say something like that. And so my wife and I were in college. We were engaged at the time, and so I had to take 2 semesters of Spanish to get my degree. The first semester of Spanish, I took the guy that was known as the easiest Spanish instructor at Baylor University. His name was Grady Ray. He was very easy to pass. In fact, he was so easy to pass, they put all the football players that had to take Spanish in his class. That's how you know you're in a good class, right? When you look around and you're like, okay, we got all the athletes in here. They're getting put in here for a reason. And so I'm in Grady Ray's Spanish class, and it was really, really easy to pass his class. And it was really, really hard to learn any Spanish in his class. And so the first semester, I make, a C or whatever. I didn't care. I just wanted out. And so I make my grade to, that'll go towards my degree. And then this jerk decides he's going to leave Baylor University and go somewhere else to teach before I get my second credit. And so now the problem is I've got to take another professor who actually taught Spanish, and I don't know what you're supposed to learn in Spanish 1, which is required to do well at Spanish 2. And so I get put in. So my wife and I, this was at her at her bequest. We were going to take this class together. The only class we ever took together in college. It was the semester before we were getting married. And she says, Paul, let's take Spanish 2 together. We both need it, and that way I can. Her idea was she could hold me accountable at that point. First day of class, it was every Monday through Thursday at 8 a.m., which I think you shouldn't have classes at 8 a.m. But anyway, so the first day she comes to my door to pick me up. She's knocking on the door. She's banging on the door. I'm still not awake. Finally, I come down, with a hat on backwards, ready to go to class. And, we go to class. We're a little later than she wanted to be because she liked to get there early. I like to get there as late as possible. So we go to class. The professor, Senor Johnson, starts lecturing. She's over here taking all kinds of notes. I'm leaning back in the chair trying to wake up still. And she says, Paul, aren't you going to write any of this down? And I said, no, I'll just use yours. And she said to me at that moment, she said, I can already tell, this is 15 minutes into class. She said, I can already tell this is a really bad idea. And so we go through the class, and he would start asking people questions. He would ask them questions in Spanish. And so he would go down the row. There were only like 15 people in the class. He would go down the row. He would ask a question in Spanish. They would give an answer in Spanish. He would ask a question in Spanish. They would give an answer in Spanish. He comes to me, and I think he asked something to the effect of, when's your mom's birthday? And I said orange. Jill's sitting next to me, and she's like this, like, I don't even know this person. And so it got to where, and this is no exaggeration, it got so bad, he would go down the row asking people questions in Spanish, and he would skip me. Like, he would ask everybody else a question, and he would skip me. And so we get to the end of the class, and he knew we were engaged, and he would interact with us some, and, So we get to the end of the class, and we took our finals, and he said, you can take your finals. If you want to come by that afternoon, you can find out what your grade is and what your grade for the semester is. And so that afternoon, I'm sitting in the middle of our apartment, and I've got a friend over. We're playing Joe Montana Sega Genesis on the whatever that thing was at the time, I forget. But we're playing this game, and Jill comes in to the apartment, and she's like, hey, Paul, you need to go see Professor Johnson. We called him Senor Johnson at the time. That was the only Spanish word I learned the whole time. Senor Johnson. You need to go see Senor Johnson. And I said, why? And she said, well, I went by to find out what my grade was. And I said, well, how'd you do? And she said, well, I go in, and he says, Jill, you've had a 94 coming into the exam. You made a 92 on the exam. That gives you an A for the semester. And she goes, and then he said, but what are we going to do about Pablo? And she said, did he not do well on the test? She knew the answer to that question. And he said, no, he did not do well. And she said, well, how not well did he do? And he said, very not well. And so then he said this, though. He said, how about this? I can give him a D for the semester, which will be gracious, and lower your grade to a B. And I said, yes, the Lord has provided, And she's like, no way, I'm not taking that. And then she's like, you got to go talk to him. And I'm like, what am I going to say? Like, I didn't do very good in the class. I didn't know any Spanish when I got there. I was behind from the start. And here's the reality. I was not living up to my potential. I wonder if there's ever been a time or a place in your life where you knew, like, I wasn't living up to my potential. Even more, I wonder if you've ever questioned, is God living up to his potential? Is God, like, have you ever wondered, is God, I don't know if we can even ask this here today. Like, is it okay to say this? Like, don't tell anybody that we talked about this. Is God living up to his potential? I mean, you could think, well, wait, this is an all-powerful God? Like, he can do anything he wants, and he's an all-knowing God. Is he behind the curve a little bit on what he knows? Like, is he catching up to the information? Because I keep praying, and I keep asking God stuff, and I keep crying out to God, and we've got needs, and he's not meeting those needs. Is God capable of living up to his potential? Is he capable of doing all the things that he's supposed to be able to do? In fact, we started this series off last week by asking the question, does God still work miracles? And the short answer to that question is yes, he does. He does still work miracles. In fact, we answered it last week, the longer answer last week. And if you missed it, you need to go watch that message. But the answer is God still works miracles. God still does miraculous things. And in fact, his miracles can be organized into several genres. There's several different genres of his miracles. And over the next few weeks, we're going to select a genre. We're going to select a genre and then talk about what these miracles teach us about God. And so this week, we're looking at miracles in nature. And the Bible is full of the miraculous in nature. These are some of the most iconic miracles in the Bible, in fact. And you know about some of these, right? Let me run through a short list here. You got Noah's flood, where God put the whole earth underwater in just a matter of days. That was miraculous. In fact, there's a very interesting fact about the ark that I can't believe a lot of people don't even know this, but did you know the ark had lights? Floodlights. Come on, that's funny. I'm just making that part up. That's not really in the Bible. There was the flood. There was the burning bush. Remember the burning bush where Moses walks up and the bush is like on fire, but it's not burning up. That was the miraculous, right? There were the 10 plagues that Moses sent against the Egyptians. Y'all remember those? There were things like turning the water into blood. Frogs everywhere, gnats everywhere. Boils and hail and fire and locusts and darkness. Then after the 10 plagues, that's when you have that whole scene where they're trying to escape and they come to the Red Sea and God miraculously parts the Red Sea for his people to walk across unharmed. There was a time that Joshua is leading the Israelite people and they're in battle and they're coming up against darkness. And he knows that, hey, if it gets dark here, they're going to be able to retreat and kind of regroup, and we won't be able to end this battle. And so Joshua goes to God and prays this prayer. Have you ever prayed a prayer this bold? Joshua's prayer was, God, would you just allow the sun to stand still? And it does. Like, it doesn't get dark for a whole extra day, and they can finish the battle. That was miraculous. There was a time that Moses was leading the people, and God tells him to hit the rock with his staff, and water would come out of it, so they would have something to drink. It was a miracle in nature. And then Jesus arrives on the scene, and he keeps it going. Very first miracle was a miracle of nature. He turned water into wine. That was a crowd favorite. I mean, if you're really trying to start a movement, that's how you do it, right? Chardonnay for everyone. He calmed a couple of storms. One time he walked on water. One time he curses a fig tree. He cursed the fig tree. The next day they come by and the fig tree's dead. That was a nature miracle, the miraculous in nature. Have you ever wondered, like, what's the deal with all the nature tricks? Why is it that God does all these nature miracles? I mean, aren't these kind of frivolous in that they don't really benefit anyone? Like, have you ever thought about that? Like, these miracles aren't really to anyone's benefit. Shouldn't God be preserving his miracles, the supernatural power demonstrations, for things that are going to help the marginalized or the disenfranchised? This seems like the kind of thing that would get Jesus canceled in 2022. And I think it's because us humans have a proclivity towards thinking that everything in the universe is about us. Like we tend to think that everything in all the universe revolves around us. And that if Jesus is going to expend supernatural energy, it better benefit humanity in some way. And here's the deal, though. The universe is not about us. This universe is not about us. In fact, Psalm 19 tells us this. It says the heavens, all of the heavens, declare the glory of God. The heavens declare the glory of God. I love it when we start discovering new things in the heavens, new things in outer space. I read this week that they had discovered, it was either the fifth no, the 5,000th or 6,000th planet that they've identified, like in the last several months. I don't know if you saw that. You don't even know if it's 5,000 or 6,000, do you? You're not keeping up with this, are you? But anyway, here's the point. You know what they said in this article when they identified this? They said that scientists believe that there's billions of planets out there. And you go, well, why would we need billions of planets if we're the only people that are alive? And I love what my friend Louis Giglio says. He says, if the heavens declare the glory of God, then I would say the universe is just about the right size. If there are billions of planets out there. It's not about us. And that includes Jesus' miracles. In fact, this was the entire point of last week's message. The primary purpose of Jesus' miracles were what they revealed about Jesus. It was what they showed us about Jesus. And oftentimes, Jesus' miracles had a human beneficiary. But even the miracles that had a human on the receiving end, I would argue, were not primarily about that human receiving the miracle. The miracles were always primarily about him. What he was revealing about himself. So no, Jesus wasn't obligated to kind of hold on to his miraculous ability until a human life needed it. That's a very humanistic view, a very human-centric view. God was teaching humanity something about himself through the miraculous. In fact, I want you to understand that these Old Testament miracles were focused around a specific time period primarily. And you need to understand, now this is going to get a little historical, okay? So just kind of get on the end of your seat and sit, lean in a little bit because you've got to pay attention to this. But in the Old Testament, here's what was happening. There was this one guy, this one family, this guy named Abraham, and God chose Abraham and said, hey, I'm going to build a whole nation of people that will be my people from your line, of your descendants. And so he started this whole nation from Abraham. And from Abraham, it went to 12 tribes and eventually a nation. And so you have this upstart nation who worships the one true God, Yahweh. Now, all of the other nations surrounding them worshiped pagan gods. So make sure you get this picture. You got this one nation worshiping our God, Yahweh, and all of the other nations are worshiping their own pagan gods. And the nations are worshiping and praying to their man-made idols, making sacrifices to them, all with no response. But then you have these followers of Yahweh, and they're crying out to their God, and he's answering their prayers. He's taken visible action that defied nature. And this God, when his people would cry out to him, seas would part, and insects and plagues would descend, and the sun would stand still. And it seems pretty obvious, right? That if your God controls nature, he's the creator. And whoever is creator is capital G, God. The God of creation is superior to any other being. In fact, King David summed it up, this whole idea perfectly in Psalm 86. In Psalm 86, verses 8 through 10, this is what it says. He wrote, "There is none like you among the gods, O Lord, nor are there any works like yours. All the nations you have made shall come and worship before you, O Lord, and shall glorify your name. For you are great and do wondrous things." What was David's point? David's point was all of these other nations have their gods, and they have their religious practices, and they pray to their gods, but their gods never respond. Their gods never intervene. Their gods never move in power. But you, O God, do wondrous things. We've seen you do the supernatural. And as a result, David says, as a result, all the nations will come to you. And so the nature tricks in the Old Testament were not just God showing off. It was revealing to the nations that he is the true God, so that they would turn to him for salvation. You know what they were? It was a kind and benevolent God doing everything he could to let people see who he really is. And Jesus' context was very similar to the Old Testament context. Remember, while Jesus walked on the earth, Israel was a part of the Roman Empire. And Rome worshiped the gods of mythology. Let me just give you a few of these. Their top god was Jupiter. Now, the Greek version of that was Zeus. They had Neptune, and Neptune was the god of the sea. Greek version was Poseidon. Pluto was the god of the underworld. Greek version, Hades. Faunus was the god of the woodlands or vegetation. Greek version was Pan. Liber was the god of wine. And as you can see, these Roman gods, now listen, stay with me here just for a minute. These Roman gods all had their little categories that they were in charge of, but they didn't cross-pollinate. They didn't cross over into somebody else's category. So you can see that they had their little categories of nature. Neptune only had power over the sea. Liber only had power over wine. So it was a paradigm shift when Jesus shows up. And he steps onto the scene, and his first miracle is turning water into wine. And they had to be like, wait, that's Liber's category. And then a little later on, he walks on water. And they were like, well, that's Neptune's domain. And then later on, he's resurrecting dead people back to life. And they're like, only Pluto has the power to do that. And then he's cursing a fig tree, and the next day it's dead. Hey, wait, he just took Faunus's job. And all throughout this time when Jesus is doing these miracles over nature, they were thinking, wait, Jesus is not staying in his lane. And Jesus was like, what? Well, I own the highway. And what was his point? His point was, I am not one of many gods. I am the one true God. And it was a major paradigm shift for them in that day. Another point of contrast between Jesus and these Roman gods was this: while the Roman gods were said to have power over their respective genres of nature, they never violated the laws of nature like Jesus did. Are you tracking with me in this? When Jesus's miracles were not a natural phenomenon that occur in nature. They were supernatural. He violated the laws of nature. So when he turned water into wine, he was breaking the laws of chemistry. I can't really tell you which laws of chemistry because I wasn't a good student, but he was breaking the laws of chemistry. When Jesus walked on water, he was violating physics and the laws of buoyancy. When he calmed storms, it was a slap in the face to Pete Delkus, who only gets about 30% of them right anyway. But anyway, the point was, Jesus wasn't just doing what was natural. He was doing the supernatural. And it was different than their gods. And so are you starting to see that these weren't just frivolous nature tricks? Jesus was revealing a really powerful, really important revelation about himself. And it was that, listen, I am not one of your little g gods. I am the one true God. Capital G, God. I'm not one of many. And this was the Apostle Paul's sermon on his missionary trip to Athens, the very center of Roman pagan religion. Felt like there was a temple or a monument on every street corner to one of these false gods. Everywhere you went in this city, you saw a monument to some god. And Paul uses this opportunity to capitalize on this idea when he gets to preach in front of all these people. And so it says in Acts chapter 17, verse 22 through 31, listen to what it says. So Paul, standing in the midst of the Areopagus, says, "Men of Athens, I perceive that in every way you are very religious. For as I passed along and observed the objects of your worship, I found also an altar with this inscription, 'To the unknown God.'" Now, do you understand what he's saying? He's saying, listen, and this is what existed there. They would have this monument, and it would have a God's name on it. And everywhere you looked, you had a monument with the God's name on it. And then over here, there's this one monument, and it was like, what if we missed a God? And so they just wanted a catch-all, and so they put, "To the unknown God," just in case we missed one. And Paul says, I saw that monument to the unknown God. And I've got news for you. What therefore you worship is unknown, this I proclaim to you. Paul was saying, I know who your unknown God is. The God who made the world and everything in it, being Lord of heaven and earth, does not live in temples made by man, nor is he served by human hands, as though he needed anything, since he himself gives to all mankind life and breath and everything. And he made from one man every nation of mankind to live on all the face of the earth, having determined allotted periods and the boundaries of their dwelling place, that they should seek God and perhaps feel their way toward him and find him. Yet he is actually not far from each one of us. For in him we live and move and have our being, as even some of your own poets have said, for we are indeed his offspring. Being then God's offspring, we ought not to think that the divine being is like gold or silver or stone, an image formed by the art and imagination of man. The times of ignorance God overlooked, but now he commands all people everywhere to repent, because he has fixed a day on which he will judge the world in righteousness by a man whom he has appointed. And of this he has given assurance to all by raising him from the dead. In other words, the Apostle Paul was saying, listen, you've got all these gods around here, but there's one God that you don't know. And I'm telling you, I know who that God is. And you need to understand that he is not a God among all the other gods. He is the one true God. And he went around and he did these miracles in nature. And the biggest one happened when he died. And God brought him back to life as an exclamation point of who he was. And you better turn your life over to that God. And I want to just conclude today by looking at one of these specific miracles in nature that illustrates all of this that we've talked about perfectly. Matthew chapter 8, verses 23 through 27, it says that when he got into the boat, talking about Jesus, when he got in the boat, his disciples followed him. And behold, there arose a great storm on the sea, so that the boat was being swamped by the waves, but he was asleep. And they went and woke him, saying, "Save us, Lord, we are perishing." And he said to them, "Why are you so afraid, O you of little faith?" Then he rose and rebuked the winds and the sea, and there was a great calm, and the men marveled. I love this story. It's such a beautiful depiction of what Jesus will do in our lives. Now the first thing that I think it's important to note when you start talking about miracles is oftentimes before there's a miracle, there's a storm. There's a desperate situation. You ever notice that? Like we want miracles. God, I would love to see some miracles. Hey, just come in and show off, God. And God said, yeah, before you see a miracle, you have to be in a desperate situation. And Jesus is on this boat, and I think oftentimes we think about this story, and we read this story, and we think like a big cruise liner, but that's not what these boats look like. I've seen one of them that they pulled from the sea from that time period, and they're little boats. They're not big. And his disciples are on it, and the scripture says that this storm comes up in the middle of the night, and waves are crashing in, and everything's coming into the boat. And Jesus is just laid out taking a nap. That bother anybody? Come on, Jesus, wake up and do something. I think oftentimes that disturbs us. We read that and we're like, why? Why are you taking a nap, Jesus? Everybody's frantic on the boat, and you're taking a nap. But in all actuality, that should give us confidence in Jesus, shouldn't it? That in the middle of the storm, he's not concerned. He's not losing sleep. And the disciples freaking out, they say, hey, somebody has got to go. Wake up Jesus. My guess it was Peter. He was always the one, sticking his foot in his mouth. And they say, Peter, you got to do it. You're the bold one. And Peter goes back and wakes up Jesus. And he's like, Jesus, wake up. Jesus, wake up. And Jesus gets up and they say, you got to help us. And I think when they said, you've got to help us, they meant, hey, can you grab an oar? Everybody else here is rowing the boat. Jesus, can you grab an oar? Or maybe can you hoist a sail? Is that what you do in a storm? I don't know. Can you do something to help Jesus? Maybe you lower the sail in the storm. Whatever you do in the storm on the sailboat, that's what they wanted Jesus to do. And Jesus is like, what time is it? And Jesus walks to the edge of the boat. The storm is going crazy, and Jesus is like, shh. And everything just dies down. Can you imagine that moment? When you're literally fearful for your life, and Jesus just whispers a word, and the earth obeys him. And look at the question that came up from this. It says, when the disciples saw the wind and the waves obey his voice, they wondered exactly what you and I would have wondered. In Matthew 8:27, it says, and the men marveled, saying, what sort of man is this, that even the wind and the seas obey him? And I would present to you that I think that's the exact question that Jesus wanted them to ask. I think that's why he did the miracle. So they would say, who is this? What kind of person can do this? And the answer is, he is no ordinary man. He was the God-man who has rule over everything. And Jesus was saying, I want this to be clear to you, that while he was born to Mary and grew up in Nazareth, and he has a normal human body, and he gets hungry and thirsty from time to time. Apparently he gets tired. He's taking a nap right then. He feels pain. But do not be confused. He is not one of many. He is the one true God. Jesus' miracles over nature were crucial because without them, someone could argue that Jesus was just a spiritual teacher, or he was just a good person, or maybe he was even a prophet from God. And that's what other religions like Islam say about Jesus. Islam doesn't deny the existence of the man Jesus. They embrace the man Jesus. They just reject his divinity. He was a spiritual man. He was a teacher. He was a good man, but he wasn't God. But if that's true, how do you explain his miracles over creation? How do you explain this violation of the laws of nature? Jesus' miracles over nature, more than any other genre of his miracles, reveal his divinity, his godness. And why is that important? Because after 3 short years of ministry, this same Jesus would lay down his life for all of mankind. And he would die on the cross. And his death would just be another factoid on the timeline of human history. But Jesus' miracles over nature reveal that he just wasn't a guy. In fact, only God himself could do the things that he did. And that was punctuated when he rose from the grave. Now, what does it mean to you? What does this mean to you? I always hate it when we have sermons and it's like, yeah, that's awesome information, but how does that help me? What difference does that make in my life? And so I want to talk to you about what difference that makes in your life. I want to just give you 2 really quick application points. And the first is this, that when you recognize what the miracles over nature teach us about God, it should cause you to recognize the invitation. You recognize the invitation because the invitation is incredible. That you have this God, the one true God, who spoke everything into existence. The billions of planets that they're telling us exist out there somewhere, he spoke them all into existence. Every star that you see in the middle of the night that's twinkling, God has named. He has dominion over everything. And yet, he invites you into a relationship. That's not exactly the response I was hoping for. Maybe you missed that. The God of all the world, who answers to no one, who is in charge of everything, invites you into a personal relationship. There are almost 8 billion people on this planet, and that God wants to have a relationship with you. That's incredible, isn't it? Isn't that incredible? And then the second thing, the second point of application is this, that if you recognize that he's not one of many gods, but he is the one true God, then the only right response is to give him your life. Like to give him your whole life, to completely surrender your life to him. When you recognize who it is that invites you into a relationship, the only response is to give him control of you completely. I've been married for 29 years now. And I remember when my wife and I got engaged, we had dated for a long time. We started dating really early. She was 14. It was the day before my 28th birthday. No, just kidding. I was only 16. I was just joking. I was only 16. And we started dating, and so we get to Baylor, and we knew that, hey, I feel like this is where God's leading us. And so we had some conversations about it, and I was about to finish my senior year. She still had 2 more years of school left, and I decided that I wanted to propose to her. And so this was before the days like we have now, where you had to have an entourage of people and make a big plan and have family show up. This was just like simple proposal days, okay? And so I planned this event at Lake Waco. There was a state park there, and I found the place where you would be able to see the sun setting across the lake. And I looked up what time the sun was going to set on that Thursday, and I have it arranged with her friend that her friend is going to drive her to this lake under this, this other story of taking her to eat dinner with some friends of the family. She's going to drive her to this park, and I've told her where to turn, and I've set up a candlelight dinner there. I've made dinner. I've brought it out. I've got the table set up with a tablecloth and everything. Thought we needed that, not just the picnic table. And so we were really fancy. And so I've got the candles there, and her friend drops her off, and we sit down to eat dinner. And the whole time, like, I'm just moving food around. Like, you don't understand. Like, I know people tell me this all the time. They'll say, man, you married way over your head. I'm like, I know. You know, now, first of all, I got to tell you, you would never say that to a woman, would you? Like, nobody ever says to a woman, like, you married over your head. Like, but we say it to men all the time, and that's okay. I'm good with it. Like, okay? So, but I know, like, I knew that, like, hey, she is way better than me. Like, I've got to figure out how to latch onto this. That doesn't sound right, does it? But anyway, you know what I'm saying. And so we do dinner. I just moved food around the whole time. I was too nervous to eat. And then I said, hey, let's go walk down here by the lake. And we go walk down by the lake. There's a log down there. We sit down on this log, and we're talking for a few minutes. And after a few minutes of talking, like, I get down on one knee in front of her, and I start saying this stuff that I probably shouldn't even tell you. It was too mushy, you know, but I said this stuff about, man, Joe, I just want to spend the rest of my life with you. And I really see you as a gift from God, a precious gift from God. And if you will let me, I will promise you that I will be the best husband that I can possibly be for the rest of our lives. And I will give you 50 weeks out of every year. I only ask for 2 weeks out of every year to be mine. Just 2 weeks that I get to hold on to and do whatever I want with whoever I want in those 2 weeks. Don't you think that was sweet? Like an incredible offer, right? Like, I was telling her, I will give you, check this out, 96% of my life. Who would not be satisfied with that? I mean, if you're watching that on Hallmark, aren't you going, oh, that is so sweet? No, you're going, what a jerk, right? Like, what jerk would do that? I'll tell you what jerk would do that. Somebody that didn't really see the value in that person. See, that was never an option for me, because I knew, like, hey, this is a valuable person. This is a valuable woman. When you recognize who God is, the only right response is to come to him and say, God, I give you everything. And in the same way that you would never watch that proposal scene set out and go, oh, that seems fair. Why would we think that our Heavenly Father would go, oh, okay. Well, God, I've got a lot of stuff going on, and I'm going to give you most of it. I just want to maintain this category over here. If I could just keep you out of this category. And God's going, no, listen, I am the one true God of the world. And the only right response is to lay down your life and give me everything.